If you're a self-employed freelancer and think getting a mortgage, especially on a second home, just isn't possible, today's episode is for you. Our guest, a New York City based travel journalist, didn't want to give up his rent stabilized apartment in the West Village. So instead of stretching to buy in Brooklyn, he leveraged a little known lending option to purchase a mid century modern fixer upper in Connecticut, turning his love of architecture from something he writes about into something he actually owns. What if your 401k came with a fire pit and a lake view? That's the question that inspired it all. I'm Katie Klein, and living in New York City meant buying a home felt impossible. So I decided to flip the script and buy my second home first. When I'm not there, it doubles as a short-term rental, covering its costs, building equity, and even turning a profit. And best of all, it gives me a place to vacation for free. What 401k can do that? Every week, join me as we hear from real people who've done the same and experts who can help you do it too. If you thought owning any home, let alone a second one, was out of reach, this is the show for you. This is Second Home First. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Second Home First. I'm your host, Katie Klein, and today we have a really exciting Real Stories episode for you all. Today, I'm chatting with Paul Jebara, a travel journalist based in New York City who writes about architecture and design. Paul has found the unicorn of Manhattan real estate, a rent-stabilized apartment in the coveted West Village. He considered giving that up to buy in Brooklyn, but as his search went on, his budget kept climbing, the neighborhoods he could afford kept getting further away, and the compromises within the space kept stacking up. Eventually, Paul decided there had to be another way. So he chose to keep renting in the West Village and buy his second home first, a mid-century modern fixer-upper in Litchfield County, Connecticut. We talk about why buying a fixer-upper became his strategic advantage to avoid bidding wars, how writing a thoughtful letter to the sellers helped his lower price offer win out, and how he navigated financing as a longtime freelancer, including mortgage options available to self-employed buyers that many traditional lenders don't even know about. If you also feel boxed in by the housing market and want to own a vacation home that pays for itself, I'm launching the inaugural class of the Second Home First Academy next month. And in just 5 weeks, I will teach you the exact 4-step framework I used to find, furnish, and finance 3 amazing homes that build my wealth while giving me a place to vacation for free. Because this is the first ever class, spots are going to be limited. Join the waitlist today to be notified when enrollment opens and to receive our deepest launch discount ever, along with a few extras. Visit buyyoursecondhomefirst.com/academy to learn more and enter your email. And now, without further ado, let's hear from Paul. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Katie. It's really exciting to be here.
So when you decided to buy your second home first, where were you living at the time?
So I was living, and I still live, I would say most of the time, in the West Village in Manhattan, New York, in a small apartment that's rent stabilized, which is all these kind of contribute to the reasons why I did get a second home first.
Were you thinking about buying a place in the West Village or in New York City at all before you bought your second home first?
Yeah, so the process kind of this wasn't really the intention to find a place outside of the city first. It's me and my partner in this essentially it's a studio, but they converted it to a 1 bedroom. And it's been almost 10 years since we've been here. We both work from that apartment. I do travel a lot from work for work. I'm a travel journalist and I write about design, architecture, everything. So all that coalesced into me looking for like what's a nice place where I can kind of turn it into my project. And that led to I've saved enough money. Maybe it's buying an apartment out in Brooklyn that has a little bit more space, to discover a new neighborhood, different factors like that. So that was actually the first step, is to try to find a place in Brooklyn. And that process, which I would say started about a year and a half ago, was increasingly frustrating because I would be at the end of my budget, like the top of my budget rather. And that would include also sacrifices, right? Like being a little bit too farther out where I want it to be, too far from the train, a smaller footprint, maybe no outdoor space. So in my mind, I was like, well, why am I doing this? Like you said, it's a unicorn of a deal. Prime location in the West Village. And I'm here, but I'm also not here so frequently. So would it be smarter to get a place outside of the city that would be more affordable, more space, close enough to the city where I could honestly do a day trip, maybe just to get out there and back? So that's when I started looking at Litchfield County in Connecticut.
Okay. And what was it that attracted you to look there specifically?
So I grew up in Connecticut. I grew up in Greenwich, which is pretty much right outside of the city. It's more of like a New York suburb than anything. So even that part of Connecticut, literally, we would never even talk about or go to. So I'd say the closest that we got was like on the highway up to a little cabin that my family had in Vermont, which was 4 hours up. So actually became familiar with Litchfield through some friends in the city that I made. And there, what I loved about it was like you get this pastoral sense of, the hills and the views and the forest, hiking trails, lakes, etc. But where I have my house now is just 90 minutes door to door when I have no traffic, versus
Wow.
2.5 hours to go upstate, 3 hours to go to the Hamptons, which was never on my radar. I don't like it out there, or Maine, which is even farther out. So I was like, oh, this place has always been on my mind as an escape. So I would stay at my friend's houses, I guess, because they all live within maybe like a 20-30 minute proximity from one another. I liked how Litchfield County is just a collection of different, essentially, towns and villages. So you can get a change of scenery within the same, hour radius, which I thought was really cool, versus like upstate, you have to drive a little farther to go from, I don't know, Catskill to Phoenicia to, all these other towns up there. So that's how I familiarize myself. And then also I would say there's a certain, it's less rustic, maybe I put it that way. Like you still have a lot of that old New England money, and a lot of celebrities have estates up there, but it still has these pockets that are relatively undiscovered. So it's kind of the combination of all of those that made me fall in love with Litchfield.
And your friends that were there, do they live there full time or do they also have second homes in the area?
So a lot of them started with second homes, and I would say the majority of them have moved up there permanently. And the ones who have not say that they wish that they could, for whatever reason, that work keeps them in the city, or they have to commute for whatever reason. So that was also a really like a seal of approval that this was the right direction, that people actually wanted to spend more time there and live there. And either they've gotten rid of their apartments in the city to invest more money in improving their homes up there. And then also the property value up there has skyrocketed since COVID. And inventory is super low. So I think everybody's kind of holding on to what they have.
Wow. And I imagine that was a bit of a mindset shift for you because you were going from let me buy my primary home. You were okay with it being a project, but you were essentially like, I'm going to buy a primary home in Brooklyn to let me buy a second home and keep my rent stabilized apartment in the West Village. Was that a big mindset shift for you? And like, how did you overcome that?
I think it came to number crunching at the end of the day. Would I be able to afford renting a place in the city and then also paying a mortgage of another house? If I got somewhere in Brooklyn, for example, I would definitely not be able to have two different homes. So this was it was a mindset shift in the sense of like, okay, now I'll have a base in the city and another place to escape to outside of the city, versus let me just go a little bit bigger, a little bit farther out to be more comfortable in my city living. But once I'm there, I'm there. I'm not going to get a second home after that. So it was kind of a blessing that I didn't find anything that I liked in Brooklyn, or maybe that everything felt so prohibitive cost wise that it directed me to look outside of the city, while I still have this place where the rent's not going to go up that much, especially with Mamdani, who's going to be putting a lot more regulations as far as campaign promises to minimize increases in rent stabilized, rent controlled apartments. So we'll see how that nets out. But as far as this house being mine at the current rent, I don't think that's going to change much. So why would I give that up?
Right. And cost wise, obviously, you're saying Brooklyn was cost prohibitive. How did you find the prices in Litchfield County comparatively?
I would say that they allowed me to be able to keep my rent. So obviously the rent, I'll rephrase it this way. The rent was a priority. If I wasn't going to give up the place in the city, then I certainly wasn't in any rush to find the perfect place within a certain amount of time in Connecticut. It made it more important to me to find a place that spoke to me, number one. Number two, that I could afford, and number three, that I could get. I had bid on a few other places that I thought were the ones, but then I would be outbid by 20%. No way I could compete with that. So that's really how it ended up happening. I looked at what I could afford up there, and another factor of this was, as a first time home buyer, dealing with mortgage lenders and seeing who would give me what, because I'm a freelancer. The way that I do my accounting and my taxes are different based on deductions, etc. So I wouldn't be qualified for what I wanted, what I could technically afford under a conventional loan process. So that required a lot more finessing, looking at all these houses on a case by case basis, seeing what I could get insured for after that. So it really was a whole, tornado of factors that I had to consider, and that's luckily everything worked out with this place. So yeah, I mean, as far as affordability goes, I would be at the top of my budget if I just had a place that I would be, satisfied with in Brooklyn and probably stuck with for at least 5 years. This opportunity to look at a second home gave me the time flexibility to be like, I'm not in a rush. I still have my place. I don't have to move. And I could either, wait until mortgage rates fluctuate, until my income stabilizes. There were a lot of factors, and everything, the dust had settled in all the right places at the end of the day.
Right. And finding the right lending partner, I think, is so crucial. And I love what you're talking about there. Something that I have found too is like if you talk to three lenders, you might get three totally different answers. And I think we often carry a lot of like shame around money. And I found a lot of people don't even want to have the conversation with the lender in the first place because they're so insecure that the lender is going to judge them or tell them like they can't possibly afford it. Where I say, like, it's information gathering. It's one person's opinion. All we need to know is their opinion. We can get a few opinions. And then, if anything, we're going to find out we need to grow our savings or work on our credit score or whatever it might be. And I think specifically with what you're talking about with being a freelancer, that is really interesting because, like you said, conventional banks love a W-2 job as opposed to what a freelancer does. So, what did you do, or what was the partnership like in the person that you ended up lending with?
So I really leaned on my agent for helping make those connections. Up there specifically, it's the pool is very small, especially when it comes to local bankers, local mortgage lenders, etc. So I wanted someone who I kind of needed that handholding. I had no idea. I had spoken with some of the larger big banks who, frankly, had a conversation with me, but did not have any solutions because, like you said, they wanted W-2s. They wanted things to be a little bit more conventional in the sense of like the numbers check once you put them through some sort of formula. And then like they don't look at case by case basis and what you could actually afford. So I had to look at alternative loan strategies like a bank statement loan instead of a conventional first time home buyer mortgage that has all these incentives like maybe a 5% down payment or something. I wasn't allowed that flexibility. So that made me be a little bit more, it made the number crunching more critical, I would say. Another aspect that you brought up, and I actually felt the opposite of a mortgage lender judging me in that way, was I didn't want them to overpromise something. I had been pre-approved for homes that were probably over 100K what I actually ended up spending on this house. And now looking back, I'm like, how did you pre-approve me for that? If I had been stuck with that and needed to do improvements and all these things, not to mention the incremental fees that come out of nowhere, I would have been kind of screwed, or I really would have had to penny pitch a little bit more. So I almost think the onus is on us as the consumer to be a little bit more conservative. And that might sound reductive to say, but especially when I was looking 6 months ago, the mortgage rates were so high. I feel like they were really thirsting for people to come and just pre-approving them for anything. So I could have potentially gone through that whole process. And then when it came to sealing the deal, they would have declined. It would have been a really big issue. So I ended up, again, per the counsel of my agent, going with a local bank, someone who still was apprehensive to work with me to a certain degree because I was a harder case. But ended up finding a solution that worked out for all of us. And, it worked out with the appraisal, and the communication was pretty seamless. I feel like you can kind of sense what's eagerness and what is just looking to move a deal past the finish line. And I feel like if I had rushed through any of that, I would have regretted it at the end of the day.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. When I was finally ready to rent out my vacation home, I had no idea what to charge guests. Thankfully, that's when I found Price Labs, a dynamic pricing tool that helps me automate pricing like a pro. It's simple. Price Labs uses real-time data to automatically adjust my rates based on local demand, nearby events, and booking trends. It's easy to use, lets me set my own minimum and maximum prices, and keeps my pricing smart and competitive without any manual work. If you want your vacation home to pay for itself or even turn a profit, you need Price Labs to help you get the most from every booking. Visit the link in the show notes and enter code SECONDHOMEFIRST, all one word, for a 30-day free trial plus $10 off your first invoice. Interior design is one of my favorite parts of buying a second home. I love creating a beautiful space. But let's be honest, staying on budget, managing orders, tracking deliveries, and juggling countless retailers can get overwhelming fast, which is why so many hosts turn to Minoan. With Minoan, you can shop more than 180 brands you love all in one place. That's brands like Crate and Barrel, Samsung, Anthropologie, Article, Casper, and so many more. They give you access to better than trade pricing, something typically reserved for professional designers, allowing you to save on every purchase. They keep every order, delivery, and receipt organized in one clean dashboard. And the best part, there's no membership fee, no subscription, no catch, just a streamlined approach with big savings. Once your second home is set up, Minoan can even make it shoppable. Your place basically becomes a four-walled influencer. So after guests spend a weekend obsessing over your couch or those sheets or that coffee maker, they can scan your QR code and order the exact same item for their own home. You earn a commission, no extra work required. To furnish smarter, visit minoan.com/secondhome to sign up and receive a free $25 in credit. And now back to the show. What you just spoke about too with the amount that banks will allow us to borrow, especially for someone who is a W-2 earner, I think you're totally right. Like, it's actually crazy. When we were talking to a lender for our first property, we didn't own anything else. And they told us we were approved for like up to more than double what we were buying. And the thing that I think is so wild is when you are buying a primary home, like you were originally trying to do in Brooklyn, we stretch to those amounts because we're like, well, it's our home and I'm going to be there all the time and it has to be perfect. And if they say I can afford $2 million, I'm spending every 2 million of
Really
those
must be able
dollars.
to afford it. Yeah, it's great.
Exactly. And then actually, if you look at the numbers, you're like, how would you would be living on ramen if you spent that amount of money. And that's what I kind of love about this strategy is when it's your second home, like you said, you had patience, you had time. You were able to be like, this is really going to come down to the numbers as much as it's going to come down to the emotional pull of finding the right house, which we want to get to because I want to hear about it, especially with your background. I can only imagine how gorgeous this home is. But another thing you talked about was how crucial your agent was. So, how did you find your agent in the first place? And talk a little bit about that partnership.
First of all, I had a really great agent that I was working with in the city who was really trying to find a solution for me. At the end of the day, it didn't work out. And he was very respectful of that. And I had met my agent up in Connecticut at a birthday party of mutual friends. It was a friend's 50th. His house is absolutely stunning. It's up in Kent. And we started talking. At that point, I had no inclination that I would be literally moving up to that area, or that I was moving to be interested in moving to that area. As I was talking to my friends, they highly suggested this agent who works with his husband. They're a team there. And what I appreciated from it was, obviously, it was a very fun birthday party. We got a little silly and casual and maintained a good friendship. But when it came to the professionalism of closing the deal for this house, he really maintained those boundaries in a very respectable way. So I liked that. And then second, when this particular house came on the market, he was also the seller's agent. So there were these ethical boundaries that I'm sure he had to straddle for lack of a better word. And I didn't know what any of that was. So I'm like, is he going to advocate for me? Is he going to advocate for the seller more? Like, does it just boil down to whoever has the best offer? So he really coached me throughout that process, both before and after. And still to this day, we're in touch all the time about like, ad hoc fixes, contractors. So I like how that I'm that I was friends with my agent first. Whether that added an extra layer of pressure to both of us, I thought it was healthy. And at the end of the day, he is excellent at his job, and I'm a homeowner because of him.
Yeah, and it sounds like he also connected you and still continues to connect you to other people who are crucial for home buying and home repair and maintaining. You had talked about a bank statement loan, and so if I understand that correctly, unlike a W-2 where it looks at like, okay, we have you make this set amount of money each year, and you have for the last 2 to 5 years, therefore we feel confident lending you X. The bank statement loan is really looking at what money do you have in your account, how much money comes in and goes out, and therefore lending you based on that. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That's
Okay.
absolutely correct. It's more looking at like what are your liquid assets and what's in your portfolio to prove that you can afford this house. And generally, it is considered to be a riskier loan because it's not conventional. So that came with a little bit higher mortgage rates, and some other discrepancies and hoops to jump through to make it happen. But I was surprised that more people don't use that. It felt like a little bit of a like I don't know the way I don't know how other people structure their finances, but as a freelancer, you hold on to a lot more cash and like have a lot more opportunities that come through last minute. Your income from 1 month, let alone 1 year to another, it varies greatly. So I think it's a bank statement loan is it's a testament to how responsible is this person at managing their finances. Have they been saving up for a house, and do the numbers prove that? So I had never thought that that would be an option, until I was, getting offers for a conventional loan for something like, I don't know, half or a quarter of what the listing price was for this house. So I would never be able to qualify.
Right. I love that you're talking about that because I think, like you said, people think that there's one way, and if you don't have X, Y, and Z, you can't afford it. But it's really about finding those right partners, continuing to ask the questions till you can find a solution. So now tell us about the house because, like you said, you were patient. You knew you wanted it to be in Litchfield County. You probably knew ish what you were looking for. Maybe tell us a bit of like what you thought you wanted and then what happened.
So as I described, Litchfield County is, a clutch of different villages, all within 30 minutes from one to the next. They each have their own character. So I was kind of open to which one I was looking for, like more of the house rather than the village, because what I was looking for was a little bit of seclusion, space, character in the house. And I would say something that was, I mean, I knew I was going to get a car. I live in the city. I did not have a car back then. So a car was a non-negotiable. So I was like, okay, that gives me extra room to be like 30 minutes from the nearest train station versus being 10 to 15 minutes,
Right.
which is strange. Is like also how you qualify finding an apartment in the city. How close is it to the train?
Yep.
So I put several offers in different houses that were, I would say, the northern fringe of the county. So pretty far, an extra 30 to 40 minutes past where I am now. The house that I found is, like I said, about 90 minutes door to door if you're taking straight up the West Side Highway with no traffic, which is how I get up there. And it's 15 to 20 minutes from the nearest Metro North station. So if I'm having guests, I just scoop them up from there, no transfers on their part. So it still felt well connected. And it's also at the southern end of the county. So I'm next to New Milford, which is sort of the largest city. I guess it's a city, down there. So I have all the conveniences of everything from like a Home Depot or a McDonald's, things that I kind of within 10 minutes of my house. But the house itself is right in between, New Milford and Sherman. And Sherman is a very small, quaint, I think one stoplight or street light is what they have there. So it really was a great balance. My house is right in the middle of those two, up on the top of a very steep hill. So I get all the privacy that I need with the conveniences of the location. And I'm so glad I didn't, um, buy further up in the county, because tacking on an extra 30 to 40 minutes makes a big difference, especially in the winter, what I'm learning now.
And you had said you made a few offers, and obviously those didn't work out. So what happened with those, and then how did you actually get this house?
I felt like it was getting my feet wet in the process more than anything. Now in retrospect, I mean, it's easy to say that I fell in love with the house that I ended up getting and it was meant to be. But at that time, you don't know. You're like, this is the one, this is the one, that's the one. So things were coming off the market so quickly. My agent would basically say, you need to come up today so we can look at this house and put in an offer same day. And I'm like, I was not prepared, still going through the mortgage lending process because at that point I was looking for something a little bit more turnkey. I didn't want to invest a lot of money. And I mean, at one point he sent me a listing of an old church that needed to be redone into like a residential. I don't know. I do not want to do that. Um, so I thought, maybe for the ones that I put offers in, maybe this is the one. Maintained well, it's kind of ticked a lot of the boxes. But like I said, I had been pre-approved and I was far at the top of my limit. And then even when I put in offers, I kind of overextended as well there. And on top of that, I was outbid by 15 to 20% when I saw the numbers finally come through Zillow once the deal closed. So it all worked out in that way, that I got this house was definitely more in my budget. And I think I put in 2 offers before I ended up getting this house.
And this one you think was more of a fixer-upper, and that's why there was less competition? Or was it that because your agent was also the seller's agent, did it ever go on the market, or was it an off-market deal?
So he really guided me to the best of my ability to make this happen, the best of his ability, I will say, within those ethical means of also representing the seller. So, for example, he took me to look at the house before it was listed. He said, I highly suggest you arrange an inspection tomorrow before it gets listed so that you can feel comfortable foregoing an inspection contingency when you put in your offer. That's as close to a cash offer as we could probably get here.
Right.
So I did that. He coached me and said, write them a letter. You're a writer, appeal to them emotionally so that you can say, you understand the bones of the house as mid-century. I understand design and architecture because that's what I write about. And that's what I felt when I was there. And that I appreciated the stories that I heard about the former owners in the house and what they did. They had a disco ball in the living room. So I only assumed the kind of parties that they had there were fun, and it really is a house for entertaining with a sunken living room and an open floor plan. So I put all of this into paper and I found out after the fact that I was not even the highest offer to go through to the sellers, that they had really wanted somebody who would cherish the house like they did. And when I met actually the former owners over New Year's party through our mutual friends, it was funny. He said, we're so glad that you ended up getting the house. It's such a great space, but we also wanted our neighbors to be happy with who had moved in there because we love our neighbors so much. So, I mean, if you put this all on paper, should I have gotten this house? Absolutely not. But it shows the power of connection and an emotional appeal because it is such an value. I mean, can only imagine what they went through to get the house and the previous owners before to fix it up. And as I'm going through this now, I appreciate every step that every previous owner had taken to make the house their home. And that's what I hope to do with this one.
You know what I love about that story too is I think so many times we just assume certain things and we have no idea what somebody else's motivation is. And like you said, you wouldn't have known that they cared about who was taking the home because they loved their neighbors and that they were really emotionally invested in the house as well. But by you taking that chance of saying, I'm going to make the best offer I can make, it's probably not going to be the highest, but I'm going to tell you why I love this house and what I'm going to do with this house. All of a sudden, they were like, "Yeah, we'll take his offer, please." So, when was it that you closed on the house, and how has it been going since then?
So I closed in the house at the end of August. So we'll be hitting the 6-month point, I guess, March-ish, doing the numbers right. I don't know. And the reason why that's top of mind is because I think that's when I can legally refinance my mortgage. So if those rates keep going down, I'm like, okay, after this point, we're all set. And after that 3-month point, I was like, okay, we can start moving in furniture. I can start to spend, not sleep on the floor and spend a week at a time there to really feel the neighborhood. I've met my neighbors. I have a car now. So it took about 4 to 5 months to really feel like I was getting settled.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
Finding the right cleaning team has been absolutely crucial to the success of my second homes. They're my eyes and ears on the property when I'm not there, spotting issues early, keeping standards high, and helping me wow guests time and again. But finding someone local you actually trust? That wasn't always easy until I found Turno. Turno connects you with vetted cleaners who understand the demands of short term rentals in your specific market. Their app makes everything simple, from auto scheduling your cleans to photo and video checklists that ensure your property looks exactly the way you want, and even automatic payments after each clean is completed. Click the link in the show notes to check out Turno and get $25 off your first cleaning.
You finally bought your dream vacation home. Now what? Your goal is for it to pay for itself, but between managing bookings, guest messages, and cleaners, it can feel like a full time job. That's where Lodgify comes in. Lodgify is a comprehensive vacation rental platform that makes it easy to manage and market your second home, even if you're just getting started. From syncing your calendar across Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com to automating payments and guest communication, Lodgify simplifies it all. It's built for beginners and comes with free one-on-one onboarding to help you get up and running fast. To make your second home start working for you, visit the link in the show notes and use code SHF20, that's S as in second, H as in home, F as in first, 20, to receive an additional 20% off their yearly and bi-yearly plans. If you're listening to this show, I know making memories with family and friends is super important to you. And that's why I'm excited to introduce you to Flightographer. Flightographer connects travelers with local photographers in more than 350 destinations around the world. But it's more than just a photo shoot. It's a way to capture meaningful memories and experience a place through a local's lens. When I look back on past Flightographer photo shoots I've done, I don't just see pictures, but special moments preserved. I remember the feeling of that day and the story behind every shot. Whether you're celebrating a milestone birthday, a family vacation, or a special getaway to your second home, Flightographer is there to capture the moments you never want to forget. To book your own Flightographer shoot, visit the link in the show notes and use code SHF25. That's S as in second, H as in home, F as in first, 25 to get $25 off your first shoot. And now back to the show. I like to think about vacation homeowners in one of three camps. And one is the profit maximizer. So someone who's buying this vacation home first and foremost to make some money off of it, and then is probably going to use it whenever paying guests aren't there. On the opposite side of that is a first dibber. So someone who's less interested in renting it, more about this is for me and my use, and maybe I'll rent it when I'm not there. And then somewhere in between is the sweet spotter. So which of those do you think you were when you first bought the house? And is that still true to this day?
I think my intentions were to be a profit maximizer because I knew that financially would be very lucrative. Kind of how that home buying process was, where I thought I knew what I wanted. This has also shifted. I am realizing, like, as a guest, if I come into this house, I want it to be intuitive, you know? And so while I'm trying to make it my own, I'm also trying to make it easy to hand off to a potential guest. And that's still going to take some time. Essentially, I would say I came in as a profit maximizer. Now I'm a first dipper, but hopefully I'll find that sweet spot that'll lie in the seasons of maybe late summer, fall, where I can get some profit off of all that I've invested in so far.
I also imagine with what you do for a living, being a travel journalist, you are that much more focused on the guest experience, whether that guest is you or a paying guest. And I heard it in what you just said of like, I really need to make sure I'm delivering that experience if I'm going to be renting it, but also in a way, making it an experience for you yourself.
The experience was definitely key because it's such a, I mean, the curb appeal is beautiful. You very rarely see houses like that in the wild, literally. So I want to make sure that it balances both or respects the bones as much as it has those modern amenities that'll make any guest happy.
That's really the through line I'm hearing with your story is taking the rush out of it. It was the same with when you were looking in Brooklyn, when you were trying to find a lender, when you were trying to find this house, and now to the point of renting it. It seems like when you take that time pressure off of yourself, you're able to make the decision that actually is better for you in the long run.
Yeah. But I'm fully aware that that's also a privilege. Not everybody has that. And also, some people, I'm extremely critical. I'm a Capricorn. I like to do my due diligence. Some people might just see what they're presented off as a first offer or first mortgage lender that they call and get really frustrated and overwhelmed with the experience and just say, put my hands up. We're just going to move forward. And as a general skeptic, I was like, no, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to take the time. And it all worked out. So I would say, like, to anybody who wants to take this journey, just ask as many people as possible for their personal advice. It's all going to be very local specific, and like, don't do anything in haste because I don't know, you could get screwed in one way or another or have regrets. But I'm sure in your experience, you had that too, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think about when I first started we had one vacation home and I was kind of like, maybe if we put it on Airbnb, like maybe we can cover some of our costs. And then so quickly realizing that not only were we covering all of our costs, but we were driving a profit and we had this amazing place that we got to go and vacation for free. And now fast forward only 3 years, we now have 3 vacation rentals doing exactly that. And it just starts to open your mind of like, if I could do that, like, well, what else is possible? And starting to look more, like you were saying, for those creative solutions, not just taking that first no at face value and saying, well, I tried. It's like, well, there's got to be a way if I'm creative enough.
Right. And I'm sure you also had resources that you could lean on, people who had maybe not identical experiences, but similar experiences. And then you learn, how can I make this my own so that it's mutually beneficial for both the guests and for yourself, who now you're building an empire. So it all worked out for you too. That's amazing.
Exactly. And when you think about like before buying this house in Litchfield, did you have any fears or concerns before making the purchase?
Yeah, I would say the fears were, the fears were financial driven. Is this something that I can sustain if I decide not to, rent it out in the short term? Because that was initially the plan. And it's still something, like, I don't know what this year has in store, work wise. I never do. Luckily, I have a steady roster of clients that I work with. But I'm trying to enjoy the accomplishment that I am so proud that I achieved. I never thought I would be a home buyer before the age of 40, let alone didn't know if I would be renting perpetually, just because of every millennial feels that way, I feel like. Um, and then once I started digging into it, like, how it's really not a buyer's market with the mortgage rates and the inventory. So I kind of had a little bit of blind faith that if it's meant to be, it will happen. But I do credit it a lot to my determination to make it work out at the end of the day, because the way that I built my career after, leaving corporate jobs, it kind of required that same grit, I guess, to make sure that it's going to work out. If I really want it so bad, it's going to work out. And so after having been a freelancer for almost 10 years, this was the next big step that I felt like I could challenge and push myself on. And does it always entail a bit of fear and, sleepless nights that my water heater is going to explode? Yeah, but that's what insurance is for. I don't know. Like, is my flat roof going to cave in during this winter storm this weekend? I won't know until I get there. So the fear is constant, but the pleasures have outweighed that so far.
Yeah, that's great advice for life as well as for buying your second home first. Final question for
Yeah.
you. What would be your final piece of advice for anyone also considering buying their second home first?
I would say take your time, and definitely try to visit the property more than once. A lot of times I feel like in such a competitive market, especially when you're in a location, the inventory is so low, you have 10, 15 minutes to walk through a house. And then your agent's like, okay, let's draft up the offer letter tonight. And then make sure you have your pre-approval and then your finances. If you have any money market funds, let's liquidate those and make all these decisions. If you can afford not to rush through any of that process, don't, because you will uncover a lot of those cobwebs and hidden nuggets that aren't gold nuggets after the fact. So enjoy the process, but also advocate for yourself throughout it. And I think you can only do that when your mind is a little bit lifted off that. The pressure is lifted off. And I think that time is the biggest pressure here.
Paul, this has been so much fun. Thank you again for sharing your story today.
Katie, it's really been a pleasure. I've learned a lot.
Thanks for listening to Second Home First. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to sign up for my free weekly newsletter at buyyoursecondhomefirst.com, where I share the simple 4-step strategy to help you do the same. If you have a minute to subscribe, rate, or review the show, or even send a favorite episode to a friend, that would mean the absolute world to me. And if you want to be a guest on the show, have a question you want answered, or a topic you think I should cover, send me a note at hello@buyyoursecondhomefirst.com or on social media at buyyoursecondhomefirst. I personally read and respond to every single message. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Klein, and I can't wait to see you all again next week. The content shared on Second Home First is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment or financial decisions.